everyone. Very excited to be starting this brown bag. We are, as the CIFAR Alliance, we are hosting this brown bag with our members, Climate Collective, GSMA, and very interesting startups that we're going to be learning about. It is with great pleasure that I'm introducing to you Alison Filler, who is the head of innovation at Climate Collective, who will be doing the honors of moderating this panel for us. And I'm going to be sharing things in the chat for you to learn about what the CIFAR Alliance is, Climate Collective, GSMA, the recent research they're going to talk to us about, the startups that we're going to be learning from this afternoon, this morning. So hopefully, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat so we can go back to them towards the end of the panel. And thank you for joining, for the support, and looking forward to hearing and connecting during this event. So over to you, Alison. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nelly. And thank you everyone for joining us today, whether that's your morning, afternoon, or evening. We're glad to be with you. And very excited to talk about tech solutions to prevent biodiversity loss today. So I have a wonderful panel with me here today, starting with Anna Cahoon from GSMA, who is a Senior Insights Manager on GSMA's Climate Tech team. She conducts research that identifies and promotes digital innovations that enable low and middle income countries to transition to low carbon and climate resilient economies. We also have with us Eli Morell from Nature Squared. Eli is focusing on the linkages between biodiversity and finance, and she works on projects related to business cases for forest landscape restoration and platforms for biodiversity and finance. We also have two fantastic innovators to share their use cases with you today. We have Mahmoud Johnson from J Palm Liberia, who is transforming the sustainability of wild palm oil harvesting by providing local harvesters with ecological information and using blockchain technology for improved traceability. And finally, we have Kenneth Rimdahl from Monsoon Tea Company, who's improving forest biodiversity by growing tea in the forest and developing a mobile biodiversity traceability app to empower farmers and ensure end-to-end product traceability. So first, we're going to kick off with a rundown of a recent report by GSMA and Nature Squared, and then we'll open it up for discussion and learn more about the different innovations in this space. So over to you, Anna and Eli.
Thank you so much, Alison. So Eli is hopefully going to share some slides, and then we can jump in. But yeah, it's great to see so many of you joining and to hear about some of the work we've been doing, as well as to hear from our startups. So I will just give a bit of context about the research that we're going to chat through, as well as the innovation fund that the startups are supported by. Hopefully you can all see.
Yes.
Yeah. Eli, if you're able just to make it full screen. Perfect. There we go. Yes. So as Alison mentioned, I am from the GSMA Climate Tech program, and the GSMA is a member of the CIFAR Alliance. But in case some of you haven't come across us before, I'll just give a very brief intro to what we do and how we do it. So if you go to the next slide, please. The GSMA is an association for the mobile industry. So it brings together over 700 different mobile operators, as well as 400 odd other companies within the broader mobile ecosystem. And within the GSMA, we have the Mobile for Development program. If you go to the next slide, please, which is essentially the foundation or the Tech for Good arm. And different programs focus on how digital innovation can be used to address and work towards sustainable development goals. And we do this in partnership with the mobile industry, as well as various other international development partners. I'm joining specifically from the Climate Tech team, and we look at how mobile and digital tech can be used to drive climate and nature action, and specifically to build the resilience of communities across low middle income countries. We have a few different themes that we focus on: circular economy solutions, climate finance, natural resource management. And then over the last year, our attention is kind of turned a little bit more to biodiversity and nature, as well as the blue economy. We have a few key strands of activities that we do. So one being research, the other is market engagement, advocacy and partnerships, and we also have our innovation funds. The GSMA has been running innovation funds for around the last decade, and we have two that are looking at building climate resilience and adaptation for communities across Africa and Asia. The two funds that we have that are specifically focused on climate and biodiversity topics are funded by UK Aid, so the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, and the Swedish government as well. So the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, so SIDA. And across these two cohorts, we are supporting 24 total startups, and they're all using tech in very innovative and unique ways to support different climate and nature outcomes. But really, in a nutshell, we are providing grants to help in the testing, adoption, and scalability of these different digital solutions that are working towards specific outcomes, as well as supporting communities. When we have applications across our innovation fund rounds, it's a really interesting picture about what's happening across our different geographic areas of interest, and it offers a quite unique pool of the startup scene and the ecosystems that are developing. In our last round of innovation funds, which closed last year, we had almost 600 applications from across 83 countries. And we dove into these applications to really understand a bit more about the types of tech being used, the very localized and context-specific solutions that are being developed, and what some of the challenges are as well. What we were interested to see with this last round is that over 1 in 10 of the pitches that we received were specifically looking at biodiversity. There was a huge range within it, but it really reaffirmed to us what we're seeing on a more global scale, which is that there is this booming nature tech market that is emerging. There's some really exciting startups that are using all different types of mobile and digital tech to address biodiversity loss. But what we also saw was that the vast majority have only been active since 2020. So they're still relatively new, reliant on grant funding, and are looking for different ways to move to a kind of more commercially sustainable footing, and ultimately need different sources of finance to be able to scale their much needed solutions. This fed into a lot of our thinking for the latest research that we have done. And a couple months ago, we published the Nature Tech Nexus, Bridging Biodiversity in Business. We created it with funding from SIDA, but in partnership with Nature Squared. So Eli will chat through a bit more of the research findings. We looked at quite a few different topics, but there were 3 main themes that we dove into with this particular report, and we'll focus on the first 2 for this session. If there's time at the end, I'll revisit the mobile industry and some of the trends that we saw there. But ultimately, first and foremost, we wanted to understand what type of tech is actually being used, what are the trends, what does it look like across different geographic pockets, and where the most promising use cases are. Secondly, we were looking at this startup scene. So with this very interesting and innovative development happening across nature tech, what are the most promising business models and revenue streams that will help these startups to scale and ultimately to have more impact on nature and on communities? And finally, we know, of course, that the private sector plays a really important role in tackling biodiversity loss. And for us at the GSMA, we wanted to understand what that means for the mobile industry. To do this, we looked at activities across some of the largest operators in Africa and Asia, as well as engaging lots of them directly. And we looked at the kind of drivers and opportunities for the mobile industry and actually tackling biodiversity loss and where some of the potential could be for future impact within the sector. But for now, I will hand over to Eli, who will talk through some of the insights from the report.
think you're on mute, Eli.
All right, thank you. Sorry for that. You can't see the Zoom screen when the PowerPoint is sharing. Oh no, it's gone. Sorry. But yeah, I'm Eli, so thank you, Anna, for introducing me. I will be walking you through a bit the findings of the report, so mostly on the tech side and related to the use cases and the business models that we've really seen emerging, and having a look a bit also at the role of the private sector and how it's supported so far the development of sort of the nature tech space. So to start off with, we really started trying to look at what mobile-enabled solutions, what digital solutions are out there, what do they look like, how are they being used? And of course, we've seen that they have a massive potential to help respond to the biodiversity crisis across many different domains, many different sectors. And we, of course, see a lot of conventional technologies that many of you are probably familiar with, so satellites, drones, camera traps, things like this being applied across a wide array of different types of solutions now. They've also been improved in recent years, and a lot of them have sort of had strides in leaps and bounds and been applied to new situations or are able to capture more data at a higher quality and higher quantity. And of course, we've seen the emergence of more frontier tech, and that's things like AI, eDNA, but also developing algorithms that can be applied to data gathered by more conventional tech. And of course, we see things now like the Internet of Things that are really helping with connectivity and the sharing of data and the access to that data. So we see a lot of conventional tech and frontier tech now being combined to rapidly improve the results of what either of them can deliver individually, and leading to, of course, lots of new types of solutions, not lots of new ways that these technologies can be applied. We do still see a lot of the developments concentrated in sectors like forestry and agriculture. And what we've seen is, in a lot of cases, there are very familiar sort of business model structures when you look at the forestry sector and agriculture sector that can maybe provide investors and business owners with a bit more confidence. Whereas when you look at other more emerging fields that are really starting to grow and apply these technologies like biodiversity monitoring and conservation, it's really less clear, and there can be a bit less confidence in how these technologies work, how these businesses can really generate revenue and survive and scale. But we do see a lot of work and expansion in that area, especially in recent years. So to give a bit of insight into what we found about the nature tech markets, we see recently it's been growing and expanding rapidly. Over the past few years, so 2018 to 2020, there's been about $7.5 billion of investment in this space. And as you can see on the right, a lot of this is still concentrated in Europe and the US. So our report and our research really was looking into where is this funding going, and when is it going towards lower middle income countries? What sort of examples can we see of successful use cases and business models? But as you can see, only 13% of that overall investment is actually going to solutions in these countries, in these areas that are often home to massive biodiversity hotspots, some of the last and largest remaining intact biodiversity hotspots in the world as well. And what we also see is that, of course, public funding is still making up the majority of investment within the nature tech space, but there is a decent amount of private investment there already. But it is important over the next years to, of course, grow this. So another topic we touched on was really looking at what are the opportunities that exist for people to get involved in the nature tech market, but also what will be the drivers that are going to help accelerate investment and interest in this field. So on the sort of more global scale, the policy and regulatory landscape is, of course, changing. We have had recently the Global Biodiversity Framework, and countries will have to start translating that framework into national biodiversity strategy and action plans, and also biodiversity financing plans. So as part of that, there will be more interest in how to achieve and implement the goals and targets of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which will mean there needs to be more solutions that can be applied to help realize those goals and targets. At the EU level, of course, we have things like the biodiversity strategy and the Green Deal, which are really trying to push biodiversity as something to consider, especially from a business point of view. And then linked to that, we have mandatory reporting requirements that have come in as of this year. So companies starting to try and report under CSRD. There's SFDR, and of course in France, there's also, for example, the French Article 29. And all of those things are really pushing a need for gathering and analyzing more biodiversity-related data. There's also, of course, other voluntary frameworks that some frontrunner companies are choosing to try and align with, whether it's TNFD or GRI, or they're trying to develop targets and transition plans for biodiversity. So we also see there will be a need in that space from corporates for not only data, but also an understanding of what that data means and how to translate that into strategies and approaches. And then investment and returns and future proofing. So these are two things we looked at more in terms of avoiding essentially future losses to the business. So for example, needing to look at what materials you're using and your whole supply chain to make sure that in the future it's possible to maintain your supply chain and to keep using the raw inputs that you do. And there's also the chance, of course, in the future that more stringent regulations, whether that's reporting or otherwise, come into place that companies will have to keep up with. So if you already start making moves now, then in the future, when these regulations do get harder and more stringent, you're already halfway there. So to dive a bit into the promising use cases we found many different use cases, revenue streams, and technologies that could all be linked together. I'll show you the sort of overall mapping we've made of this at the end, but what we really want to emphasize with this report was there are so many options and opportunities, and it really depends on what the needs are of each individual company on what they're trying to achieve, where they're trying to achieve it, and how they want to do that. So we will highlight 4 as part of this presentation. And the first being reporting and disclosure as one of the promising sort of use cases. And we see that really being driven, the demand for that being driven by reporting requirements, as I previously mentioned, like CSRD, but also voluntary requirements. So companies are really needing assistance to gather, understand data, to measure and monitor nature-related impacts and dependencies, and to be able to use this to meet the reporting requirements placed upon them. So of course, here we see lots of different revenue streams coming up for companies that are trying to fill that data gap when it comes to biodiversity. And that includes, of course, like data collection services, analysis services. Often we see lots of platforms that have either subscription fees or specific project fees where you can just have an analysis done of certain parts of your business activities, and then verification and assurance services to be able to validate the information gathered and then report and disclose on it. So there we see a lot of technologies to do with sensing, a lot of conventional technologies, but also more spatial analysis, and in recent years also, of course, more modeling softwares and softwares that can interpret that data and translate it into clear action points. We see very similar movement with corporate target setting as a use case. So that's where companies are really trying to set science-based targets for nature, often in line with the SBTi. And we also anticipate in the future this will become a bigger, more important use case. So right now, under CSRS, it is not mandatory to, to publish your biodiversity transition plan, like it is with climate. However, if this does become a case in the future that it is mandatory for companies not only to develop one, but to disclose it, then this will be an important use case that we see would expand in the future. So of course, the revenue streams we see attached to this often include analysis and advisory services, and a lot of the organizations we've seen that are already starting to trial these sorts of products for companies are using, again, platforms where you can subscribe and have a recurring ongoing product from them, or it's a more standalone development of this strategy, and then it's delivered, and it doesn't need to be monitored then by the same company over the years. And we see here a lot of similar technology as with reporting and disclosure. And our last two use cases that we really wanted to highlight are supply chain transformation and project management. So supply chain transformation, we see growing, of course, with the different regulations that have come up, but also with companies really looking from a PR perspective, having CSR concerns, wanting to improve their supply chains, but also wanting to make sure that those supply chains are resilient in the future. And that's, for example, if you're an agricultural company, one of the commodities that you are really dependent on and that goes into a lot of your products, that is still available in the future, or that there are sustainable alternatives. So here we do see a lot of companies that are popping up that are offering analysis and advisory services. So it's very bespoke at the moment, looking sort of on a company by company basis at certain parts of the supply chain, just to find out, okay, what alternative commodities are available in your area, or how do you reduce your environmental impacts in the area that you harvest from, to be able to reduce future potential impacts and, of course, reduce the profitability of your business in the future. So that uses similar technologies as all of the other use cases. As you see, a lot of the technologies come back in all of the use cases because they're so differently applied and widely applied. But of course, lots of spatial data analysis, satellites, sensing, and a lot of this also uses blockchain and network sensors and drones. Finally, another interesting use case that we've seen is really linked to project management. And here it's often when it's about, for example, a large-scale conservation project, or if you're wanting to implement, for example, a project that's really aiming at leveraging biodiversity credits in the future, or carbon credits, or payments for ecosystem services, because this use case is really about implementing a project on the ground and being able to measure, monitor, and verify those impacts so that you can actually sell, for example, biodiversity credits linked to that restoration area. So from all of this, we really came across three promising markets and revenue streams for startups in the near future. So the top one that we find that came up a lot across the literature, across all of the interviews and all the people we talked to, was really the potential for monitoring, reporting, and verification services to open the doors for future markets and types of revenue streams. So this is really gathering data, analyzing it, and providing advisory and verification services based on that. And what we find is if monitoring, reporting, and verification services can expand, it could really open the door for the development of the biodiversity credits market. Because in order to develop a strong credits market for biodiversity, we need good baselines established. We need good indicators to understand biodiversity credits, the impacts on the ground, and to make sure they're verifiable, and to make sure that then they are investigated and they can be found to be true. So you can essentially sell the value of that restored land and have confidence in it. And it's very similar for payments for ecosystem services. With better MRV technology and services, it is easier to be sure about the impact that's being created and open up potential for local communities and Indigenous peoples to receive payments for the contributions that they make to restoration and conservation. So finally, the role of the private sector, we of course really want to highlight, and we see that the private sector has huge potential to play a role in increasing the scale of the nature tech market and bringing some of these solutions to new sectors, new domains. So of course, we have seen that there are examples of organizations using blended finance models, collaborating with public partners to help share and reduce risks and really unlock more finance for startups. And another way that we see this happening is some private and public partnerships have emerged that really look at developing pipelines of investable projects and exploring proven business cases and sharing those insights, because with a better understanding of the revenue streams, the business cases, and things like ROI and added value of certain business models, you can really increase confidence in the market and in these use cases and business models, which can help increase, of course, the investor confidence in these things. So that is all from our report for now. Oh, I have the slides for the next one. I will quickly share, though, our one last infographic that we came up with for this report. And this is really just to show the endless sort of combinations that can be made from all of the potential solutions that are out there. So these are only a few of the examples. There are many, many more that can be combined, but just to give an idea of really the potential scope and scale of the different elements that can be combined. So thank you for listening, and I will hand over now after sharing the slides again.
Thanks so much, Eli and Anna. This is a fascinating findings that you were able to share with us and summarize. I particularly like that web of technology use cases and revenue streams at the end. It really shows how the tech and the opportunities are creating an enabling environment that has so many different combinations and operations that can be explored depending on different contexts locally. So next, before we get into our discussion, we will hear from our two innovators on the call. First from Mahmoud Johnson. Over to you, Mahmoud. Tell us a bit about J-Palm Liberia and what prompted you to start this company.
Thank you very much. J-Palm is working in the palm oil value chain. And usually when we talk about palm oil, I think the first association is it being bad for biodiversity, being bad for the environment. But that narrative, while it may be true of some of the large multinational firms that we see in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world, oftentimes ignores the realities that smallholder farmers face in Liberia and in some West African countries where oil palm is indigenous to the region. It grows naturally as a wild crop, and is a very important labor for biodiversity protection because it serves as an important source of livelihood for people in the communities, and so therefore provides incentives for biodiversity protection and regenerative agriculture. However, many of the smallholder farmers who make palm oil in Liberia, in fact, by estimates, more than 90% of them live in poverty because they don't have access to processing tools, they don't have access to markets for their produce. And oftentimes they're left out of these lucrative niche supply chains for sustainable ingredients because they don't have access, they're not tapped into those networks. What we're doing at J-Palm is essentially trying to, in a way, standardize what they're doing. So we work with them, provide access to machinery that enable them to produce the oils in a safer and cleaner environment, better quality oils. We also work with them on trainings to ensure that they continue to observe regenerative agricultural practices and organic. For the first time ever, we've been able to get organic certification for harvest palm oil in Liberia, and it's also certified regenerative. And we are also now building through GSMA blockchain technology that enables traceability through the supply chain. And this is important because the core model is interesting to manufacturers of sustainable products like soaps that market along the lines of it being good for the environment, good for the planet. You know, for example, one of our biggest partners and clients sells in Whole Foods, and Whole Foods has a mission of nourishing the people and planet, right? And we had a whole team here from Whole Foods and whatnot. So the claim about biodiversity is very important, and sustainability is very important, and the blockchain enables us to be able to not just talk about this thing, but also to be able to prove where we're sourcing our ingredients from, and to have that end-to-end traceability in the supply chain, so that eventually, you know, as we start to scale up, when we start to tell the story, it's not just, we're not just talking about it on a high level in terms of it being good for planet, but we can actually prove where we are sourcing from, how it's benefiting the communities, and how it's also benefiting or how it's helping to maintain and improve biodiversity in the area. So I mean, there's a lot more to the J-Palm story, but essentially that's what we're doing.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. I have plenty of questions for you coming up. But first, let's hear from Kenneth at Monsoon Tea Company.
Hi. So at Monsoon Tea Company, I came to Thailand about 20 years ago. I worked with tea since 1993, but I came here and I found that tea was growing inside the forest. And I was like really shocked because what I've seen before is tea plantations around in China, India, and so on that are monocrop tea plantations. And when I found this, I couldn't really let it go. So 10 years ago, I started this company, Monsoon Tea Company. And what we do is something that's called forest-friendly tea, we call it. So it's a tea that actually grows together with the forest, together with the biodiversity in northern Thailand. And before it was, I could just like say that this tea grows together with biodiversity, but because of GSMA, we now have the possibility to actually start to make an app for the farmers so we can trace exactly where they pick the tea, but also in each area where they pick the tea, also measuring the biodiversity. So we will create a scale from 1 to 5, like how much biodiversity grows around every tea that we sell on the market now. So in our teas, there will be like a number from 1 to 5 that shows that this have more biodiversity than the other. And the farmers will actually earn more money the more biodiversity they create around the tea. So that is, thank you very much, GSMA, for making us be able to prove it and make this start to measure the biodiversity. Because now when I can just see and I say this looks like it's a high biodiversity, but I couldn't really prove it. But now with the measurement system and the traceability system, we can also start to actually go into tea plantations that doesn't have any biodiversity, that grows in monocrop way, but start to change it and to start to reforest or re-biodiversification, I call it. Like we could actually start to increase biodiversity in also existing monocrop tea plantation because we will have that system of measurements and so on. So what our idea in the business is that we want to sell as much tea as we can. And today we have 8 tea shops here in Thailand, and we sell on retail, and we also sell on wholesale to many hotels and top restaurants and so on. And we also export to have big customers in Europe, and we're starting now in the United States as well, because we want to sell as much as possible, because then we can buy from farmers, but we only buy from the farmers if they not cut away the forest and so on, if they start to increase the biodiversity. So in this way, and then we'll get actually now with this system that we're creating now, when they will actually earn more money, the more biodiversity they create, they will become automatically the protectors of the forest instead of police and military to check that they don't cut things down. Because normally the way to make money is to cut the forest down and start to put some crops like rubber or pineapple or corn or something like that. So so this is what we do. We try to sell as much tea as we can so we can buy as much as possible from farmers that take care of the biodiversity and actually increase the biodiversity here in northern Thailand. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for telling us more about that. I want to open it up to a few questions for our panel. And if you have questions for any of the speakers, please do drop them in the chat and we'll throw those in there as well. Maybe to start, let's zoom out a little bit and think of why we're here discussing this in the first place. So maybe to Eli and Anna, where are we falling short with existing economic models to protect biodiversity? Why do we even need to be looking for new business models to fund biodiversity protection?
Yeah, you go ahead and jump in.
Thanks. Sorry, it always takes my mic a moment to turn on. But I think that's sort of what's been recognized in recent years across many sectors, is that the business models that we currently have that depend on direct exploitation of nature, they might work now, but at some point there won't be enough nature left, or enough healthy nature left to really be able to keep those systems running. So it's better to transition when we actually have a choice in how to transition and when we have the time to develop these models, rather than wait till it's far too late.
Another key point that we really reflected on in the report is the existing business models and financing streams not giving sufficient attention and consideration to Indigenous people and local communities. So ensuring that communities on the ground who have the knowledge and the expertise that really needs to be leveraged and respected are given due kind of importance and recognition, as well as financial compensation as well for the important work that they're doing. So that's something that we reflect on as being perhaps a gap, but also somewhere that there is progress being made.
Okay, so business as usual isn't getting done. Nature is degrading at a rate that's unsustainable for us to maintain society and to maintain our economy as we know it. And in addition, there are these gaps in ethics and in community engagement, specifically with local communities and Indigenous peoples, if I hear you right. And I think estimates are showing that it's about, the nature finance gap is about $600 to $800 billion every year, right? We're only currently funding about 100 billion approximately into nature protection. So thinking about ways that we can channel more capital into that space. Mahmoud and Kenneth, you are building this into your business operations. Can you tell us a bit more about, you started to say where the tech is helping you to address nature action in your work, but Mahmoud, why did you opt for blockchain in particular? You were telling us about traceability. Can you tell us why you went with blockchain to enable that, and what does it help you to do that you weren't able to accomplish without it?
Right. Well, first of all, there's a basic traceability system that allows us to know where we're sourcing our materials from. But we're also thinking about this, both in terms of the short term and the long term. So we're thinking of it in terms of having efficiency in our supply chain, having information about where we're sourcing from and all that stuff. But the biggest thing is we're thinking of it long term in terms of marketing. We think that there's an opportunity here with buyers who are using our oils in their ingredients. And the idea is to have enough data on the blockchain that allows us to be able to use the data to tell stories about what trends we're seeing in the communities, how much money are farmers earning over time, what's happening to the tree stock in the area. So in addition to traceability app, we're also working on a tree health application that tells us about what species of trees are we seeing, that we can be able to track those over time. And so all of these things are now feeding into a data bank that eventually will feed into some sort of platform. And our vision, right, is that eventually we can have all of these things feed into some sort of QR code on packaging that allows consumers to have deeper visibility into the supply chain. Because if you look at natural ingredient supply chains and the whole sector around sustainable sourcing, I think that there's a lot of work being done, but there's not a lot of quantification, right? There's a lot of buzz about fair trade, and we'll talk about organic. But what does that really mean? And so we are trying to say, okay, can we develop a new standard here where we can actually quantify what it is that we're doing, how many farmers that we're working with, how much money that they're earning, where are they, right? What's happening in the community. So there's a lot of things involved. There's the storytelling aspect. There's the aspect about supporting certifications. We want to be able to prove that we're actually sourcing our oils from the wilds, and we're not taking it from the plantation and passing it off as wild palm. And the blockchain enables us to do that because of the geotag that shows that we're actually sourcing from forested areas. So there's a lot of considerations in that regard.
Okay, thanks. And so I'm hearing that you're focusing a good amount on the consumer connection with the sourcing of the product, right? And I heard something similar from Kenneth as well, that to be able to show on your packaging the level of biodiversity uplift that's measured for a particular tea, and the more biodiversity uplift that's being demonstrated, the more people are earning. Can you tell us a bit about what opportunities this is creating for the local communities that you're working with?
Well, the local communities, first of all, it creates an opportunity of not cutting down. I mean, there's a lot of villages, especially among certain minority groups, that they are cutting down the forest. They're not allowed to, but they do it anyway. They put cord and things like that, and you can really see the big difference in the quality of life in those villages, because it's really very destructive, and they are burning every year they are burning the rest product from the corn and so on, and they get a lot of diseases. The cancer is going up enormously because of this kind of agriculture method that they do, especially with corn. So this is a way that the communities can stay and live in an environment that is actually quite healthy and so on, and they will earn money, and the more they increase. For me, it's not so important that it's perfect. It's the increase of biodiversity that is important. That's why I want to have a scale, not like a yes or no, like this is forest friendly, yes or no. It's a scale of increasing all the time. And as we pay them more as they create more biodiversity, of course their income gets higher, and the better life for them in these small communities up in the mountains.
Creating incentive.
I think it can change a lot. Yeah, creating an incentive to actually protect the forest instead of cutting it down.
Yeah,
because we pay more than the corn. We pay better for the farm. And if nobody in these mountains want to destroy the nature, it's just like they need money, like everyone. And so that is why they do it. If we can give them more money by protecting the forest and keeping the forest, and actually adding forest as well with this new ways we can do that, actually that's great. So then they want to choose that way, of course, because they prefer to have the biodiversity there instead of killing it.
So you're making it economically feasible for communities to choose the option that restores nature.
Yes. And then, of course, because we pay more as the biodiversity increase, we will also have another price. So the customers will actually pay a little bit more, the higher biodiversity that things grows with. So we have the economical, we also get from the customers the money to increase the payment to the farmers.
Great, thank you. I saw a hand before from David Bennell. David, did you have a question? Maybe not. Well, if you do, feel free to drop it in the chat or raise your hand again, and we'll come back around to you. So you're both using novel tech in your business operations to incentivize outcomes that are better for nature and also economically feasible. Oh, you can't unmute, David. Please feel free to drop it in the chat then, and we'll get to it. Where, Kenneth and Mahmoud, do you think the tech needs further development? Where do we want to be that we're not quite there yet?
For me, it's the measurement of biodiversity. We are looking at the method. Before COVID started, I was doing like insect traps and so on, and try to measure myself with insect trap, because insects is a good indicator how much biodiversity actually there is. But I think we are trying to find out with the tech how we can measure them. We are putting microphones in the areas where we pick the tea to create the sound, to listen to the sound, and the AI will then analyze what kind of insects, how many, and how many birds and so on that grows there. But then we have to figure out exactly how we can get more precise, and also how the measurement of the flora and so on. But there are a lot of things going on there. We are studying it right now, and we are working hard on finding the best way possible for having a good measurement of the biodiversity in each area.
Yeah. What Kenneth said, I agree to that. And I also think in our case is also consideration about creating technology that take into consideration the infrastructural constraints that we have, especially in low developing countries, where many communities don't even have cell towers. And so if we are relying on, which we do rely on internet technology, then we have to keep moving back and forth, take a phone into a community, do some work, and then take it back to where you have network to upload. It becomes a challenge, and some of these places don't even have access to electricity, right? So you have potential for saying, is there a solar version of some of these technologies that enabled us to not have to move things back and forth, because it's actually quite challenging to manage all of this when you have, I mean, most people focus just on like on the software side, on the analytics, but then you have to also worry a lot about hardware and worry about moving things back and forth. It becomes quite challenging.
Yeah, the digital divide is real. David, you're back with us.
In Thailand, we are quite happy with the technology of the telephone companies and so on. It's quite good, and also the infrastructure is pretty good in Thailand. So we are lucky with that part. But there are areas that we have to get the telephone companies to actually put on new what do you call it? Yeah, so we can get internet connection to those areas. But most of the areas are connected here in Thailand.
Gotcha. David.
Okay, Allison, can I give it a shot?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. Greetings, everybody from northern New England in the United States, where I live about 3 miles from Anna Lerner, the CEO of Climate Collective. So Allison, thanks. A shout out to all of you for putting this together in this great group. I guess I'd direct this, Anna, a question for you, and I'm sorry I came late, so I might have missed it. The investor network I'm a part of helped advise another ratings agency in the creation of their regenerative agriculture framework. And I'm curious how you see sort of your industry evolving in its use of closer to real-time technology to build these amazing systems that you have and get information in the hands of investors, community stakeholders, and others, so people can make better, quicker, faster, smarter decisions. I'm listening really intently to these conversations that we're having right now, and I'm just wondering what you're seeing evolving and what you're paying attention to at the front end, because you make a decision, you make a rating, you make a proclamation about a company, and it impacts everything almost immediately, at least around share price. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it might be worth just me offering a bit of context about the mobile industry more broadly and where it's at in terms of biodiversity and how the sector is moving. So as I kind of referenced in the presentation earlier, we did look at the mobile industry and how it intersects with nature. And what we heard was that for a lot of the mobile network operators, biodiversity is moving up the agenda. It is gaining traction, but as it stands, it doesn't yet have the level of visibility or kind of internal priority yet from, say, for like net zero commitments or circularity and other topics that have been more prominent over the last few years. At this stage, most of the mobile operators are really just trying to get to grips with the new reporting requirements and conducting materiality assessments and understanding what it means across their supply chain. It's worth noting that the GSMA has a biodiversity task force. So it is currently 40 mobile operators that are coming together to work collaboratively to really understand the impact of the sector and how we as a mobile industry want to respond and take action on biodiversity loss. As part of the research, we also did a deep dive into understanding what existing initiatives actually look like across the mobile industry. And what we saw is that there are quite a few long-standing projects or initiatives where the mobile industry has been looking at nature conservation and restoration. To date, the vast majority have been focused more on kind of philanthropic activities. So under the CSR arm, for example, protection of endangered wildlife or tree planting and so on. However, we are starting to see a shift more towards the industry looking at where nature and business intersect. So there is a lot more recognition now of the need for future-proofing, the potential opportunities for the mobile industry as well, not just in terms of, you know, the brand and the business, but also for the communities that they are working with and looking to support. So we profile some of these examples in the research, but one interesting case study is from Indonesia. So the network provider Indosat Ooredoo Hutchison initially started with a pilot project with the GSMA and with funding from GIZ to look at how the Internet of Things could be used to strengthen sustainable shrimp farming in North Kalimantan in Indonesia. And while the tech was initially being offered in a more kind of philanthropic capacity, actually what they found was that it was very useful exercise to be able to test their developing tech within this environment and to see then the potential use case for other businesses. So it kind of served all purposes of people, planet, and business or profit, where Indosat Ooredoo Hutchison was able to test their tech, gather really kind of valid and credible data about the application of their technology, and then use it for considering other business cases and uses elsewhere. And then on the flip side, because of the benefit, they're now looking to scale up and expand into other areas. Now, it's interesting because I guess sometimes, you know, in the nature world, that might seem a little uncomfortable, but what we really want to focus on is where there's the intersection of the benefits for different sides. So particularly within the mobile industry, if there's a biodiversity or nature project which does offer a bit more of a commercial lens, then ultimately it will have a longer shelf life, more investment, more internal commitment, and in turn lead to better nature and community outcomes. So that's what we've been really trying to look at and explore. In terms of the tech being developed, it varies a lot by different geographies, but we did see some interesting examples where some mobile operators will have, say, a kind of arm where they second staff to go and work on specific projects to be able to test different tech and how it would then apply within a specific nature conservation environment. So another example could be Vodafone, who have developed a kind of AI based solution to tackle human wildlife conflict, where it was really initially a passion project from some team members within Vodafone, but it has proven, at least at this early stage, to be very potentially impactful. And there has been a lot of interest generating internally as well about how to potentially develop that and looking for different ways to make it more kind of commercially viable so that it can scale. So I think that there is a lot of potential for the mobile industry to be offering tech, expertise, investment, but also partnership to be able to create the high impact digital solutions that we're looking for.
Thanks for lending us there, Anna. We are just about at time, so I want to thank all of our speakers today, Eli, Anna, Mahmoud, and Kenneth, for sharing your findings and your experience with us. I look forward to staying in touch with all of you, and if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks very much for joining us.